Senators take a stand on Syrian refugees. Join us for new developments from the Capitol. Tracking a shift in presidential polls. Which candidates are getting a boost? A Christian monastery destroyed. Terrorists reduce it to rubble, and you'll see evidence of the atrocity. And the Pope receives a special invitation from Muslims. At the same time, he's celebrating Christian unity. Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Wednesday, January 20th, 2016. The mass migration of refugees from Syria and Iraq poses a political problem here at home. Senators weigh the consequences of religious freedom and public safety. Good evening. Thanks for joining us. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. A key vote on the Capitol Hill today. Jason Calvi is there with this report. Jason?
Brian, Senate Democrats blocked a Republican proposal to clamp down on Syrian refugees entering the country. It was seen as such an important vote that Senator Ted Cruz canceled campaign stops to be here. Also here today, Marco Rubio and Rand Paul. Now, the bill would require the heads of the FBI, Homeland Security, and National Intelligence to verify before any refugee comes from Syria or Iraq that they can then come to the United States. It already passed the House, and today senators debated the bill.
Well, I like the title of the bill, Securing America Against Foreign Enemies, but I don't think refugees are our enemies. I think ISIL's our enemy.
What this legislation is about, though, is about national security. People who are refugees, whether they're adequately vetted by the appropriate authorities before they come to the United States and live in our communities. This is not about banning
Republicans
refugees.
Needed 6 Democrats to vote with them today, which didn't happen. Now, Democrats unsuccessfully wheeled and dealed, trying to add amendments today, one of which during this election year would have put Republicans on the record either for or against Donald Trump's proposal to ban Muslims from entering the country. Brian?
Thank you, Jason Calvi at the Capitol, and we're also following developments in the presidential race. Donald Trump picks up a prominent endorsement, and Bernie Sanders gains a lead over Hillary Clinton. Chief White House correspondent and political director Lauren Ashburn is here with more.
Brian, the race for the White House is heating up as former vice presidential candidate Sarah Palin splashes onto the national stage with her high-profile endorsement. Meanwhile, it's heartache for Hillary Clinton. It's less than 2 weeks until the Iowa caucuses, with New Hampshire's primary not far behind. Donald Trump holds a more than 2-to-1 advantage over the next closest contender, Ted Cruz. In a double whammy, Cruz lost the Iowa governor's support.
I'm here to support the next president of the United States, Donald Trump.
And it didn't help that former Alaska Governor Sarah Palin said she's stumping for Trump. But will she help the Donald? Capitol Hill reporter Jason Calvi caught up with someone who would know, Senator John McCain, who chose Palin as his presidential running mate in 2008.
Well, I would imagine so, but I think you ought to ask the experts on these things, which I am not one.
But will he back her choice for president?
I'm not endorsing anyone now that Senator Graham has left the race.
On the Democratic side, Hillary Clinton woke to stunning news. A new CNN WMUR poll shows rival Bernie Sanders with 60% support among likely Democratic primary voters in New Hampshire. That's to Clinton's 33%. Sanders is riding his popularity wave by twisting the knife.
Then there's an argument, well, the reason we have to vote for Secretary Clinton is she is the only candidate who can beat right-wing Republicans. If you want somebody who is going to beat Donald Trump, who is going to beat the other Republicans, I think Bernie Sanders is that candidate.
Iowans will get another chance to see the Democratic presidential hopefuls up close when they face voters in a CNN-sponsored town hall on Monday in Des Moines. Brian.
Thanks, Lauren. Other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. Yet another terror attack to report tonight. Gunmen target students and staff at a university in Pakistan, killing 20 people. The Taliban claims it is not responsible. That group disowning the group behind the shooting. This violence comes less than 2 years after 150 people, most of them children, were killed in another Pakistani school attack. Ancient Christian history, preserved for centuries in Iraq, is wiped out forever. We now have visual proof. Satellite photos confirm what church leaders and Middle East preservationists had feared. The oldest Christian monastery in Iraq has been reduced to a field of rubble.
The color or the signature that I'm looking at as an imagery analyst is very much indicative of when you have rock or stone that's been pulverized.
St. Elijah's Monastery stood as a place of worship for 1,400 years. Most recently, U.S. troops visited. In earlier times, generations of monks tucked candles in the niches, prayed in the chapel, and worshiped at the altar. These graphic images of the destruction of this ancient Christian treasure don't lie.
Keep in mind this road. As you now go into the other image, the temple or the monastery has been destroyed. You're seeing that same road, the same configuration, so you know you're in the same spot. You look at the equipment here, it's all lining up, so you know you're looking at the same exact place, and you're able to do this comparison very quickly.
They are very non-renewable resources. Once they're gone forever, and while you can reconstruct a building, it loses its historic fabric.
St. Elijah's Monastery, yet another victim of the Islamic State group's relentless destruction of heritage sites it considers heretical.
We have to mourn the loss for future generations, that they will never be able to stand in these locations and experience the feeling of looking around and seeing what our ancestors were able to do.
Father Paul Habib of Mosul says Christian history in Iraq is being barbarically destroyed. Vatican spokesman Father Federico Lombardi notes that the monastery dates back before the break between Orthodox and Catholics, so the site would be special for many. He calls its destruction very sad and dramatic. Police in Israel believe they caught the people who vandalized Dormition Abbey. That is the shrine marking the place where tradition says the Virgin Mary died. 2 teenagers believed to be Jewish extremists were arrested for anti-Christian graffiti. The Holy Father says baptism makes all Christians brothers and sisters. Pope Francis dedicated his weekly teaching today to Christian unity. He says the grace in baptism creates an indissoluble bond between the baptized. The Pope says Catholics, Orthodox, and Protestants share a common mission, transmitting the mercy we receive from God to everyone. Mary Shovlain joining us from Rome tonight. Mary, tell us about a delegation of Muslims who have met with Pope Francis and the invitation they gave him.
That's right. This morning, before the weekly general audience, he met with that delegation of Muslims, including 5 members representing the local community here in Rome and Italy as a whole. They wanted to invite him to visit the mosque, especially in these times, they said, when relations between the religions could be strained, giving the spate of attacks against Christians around the world at the hands of extremists. They want to keep this dialogue going. Father Lombardi said the Holy Father is seriously considering the request, but any dates you may hear floating around at this point for when it may happen are totally unfounded, and the Vatican will let us know if and when the Pope decides to visit the mosque.
Also, Mary, a very dramatic story from the wee hours of the morning there near St. Peter's Square. Tell us about it.
This morning at 2 a.m., a homeless woman in the cold, freezing temperatures here in the Eternal City gave birth in a piazza not too far from where I'm standing. She gave birth on her own in the cold. Local police happened to be going by in their vehicle. They rushed out, covered her with their own coats to keep her warm, called an ambulance, and took her to a nearby hospital. The Pope's charity official then went to see her. Monsignor Krajewski went to see her and the newborn child in the hospital, offering them a place to stay in a Vatican-run home for women and children in need. At this point, Father Lombardi has told us the mother has not decided whether or not to take the Vatican up on its offer.
But the corporal works of mercy, very visible. Mary Shovlain from Rome. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Coming up, the next step in the gun control debate, what the Obama administration told lawmakers today. And celebrating life across the country. Learn about a big event in L.A. The closing bell on Wall Street, where stocks hit their lowest level in nearly 2 years today. Another plunge in the price of crude oil sent stocks sharply lower. The Dow Industrials were down 500 points at midday. The Dow rebounded some this afternoon, still closing down 249 points. Thanks for joining us on this Wednesday, January 20th. I'm Brian Patrick. The U.S. Attorney General defends President Obama's latest approach to gun violence. Loretta Lynch testifying at a Senate appropriations hearing this morning. She says the president is lawfully putting new gun control policies in place. Lynch says gun violence kills too many people.
Our friends and family members, our neighbors, our fellow citizens are being taken from us day after day after day.
Republicans question the legality of the executive orders, saying they'll do little to curb gun violence. Our political director, Lauren Ashburn, recently discussed gun control with Republican Louisiana Congressman Garret Graves.
The United States Catholic Conference of Bishops said, "We welcome reasonable efforts aimed at saving lives, making communities safer. We hope Congress will take up this issue in a more robust way." What is your answer to that?
You know, look, we actually share the objectives of reducing violence, reducing senseless deaths, but the solutions in many cases simply don't provide, or the solutions being proposed by the White House simply aren't going to make progress on these issues. And I think the Affordable Care Act is one on the uninsured, and I think some of the, quote, solutions that the president has proposed on gun control are similar. Look at the statistics. This is not the way to address the problems. I want to be clear, though. There's some good things that we support that are included in there, including the mental health funding and the improved access to mental health, including some of the management changes. I think they're positive, but overall...
This has been strictly a partisan issue. Right down the line, almost. The NRA didn't show up. The Guns Owners for America didn't show up last night. And it seems like the White House is trying to have a dialogue, and that Republicans are not working toward the same ends.
Look, we would meet anytime, any day. I think the concern that I saw expressed on behalf of those organizations was this: it was a sort of a stacked deck against them. But
that's not true, because there were many people in the audience who actually were against the president's executive action.
Yeah, and again, I think the concerns that they raised, that those organizations raised, that they felt that it was a stacked deck against them. But I'm going to go back to my original comments. All of us absolutely are opposed to what's happening in regard to the violence and the increased senseless deaths from some of these attacks. But we've got to address the true root cause of the problem and not go out there and do all these things that are simply distracting and aren't going to truly make improvements and reduce some of the violence that's occurring. And that's why I think, you know, some of the things like the management reforms the president's talked about, the increased agents, the improved background checks, the improved coordination, and the access to mental health that needs to be broader.
I think you're in the minority.
Or also, well,
among your colleagues.
Well, but look, I mean, I read every single word in the executive order and the action. I watched this press conference. There are things in there that make sense, but in regard to some of the actions he's taking on the other executive orders in terms of trying to, I think, do some encroachment on the Second Amendment, it does raise concerns, and I think it goes beyond his authority.
Thank you very much for joining us, Congressman Garret Graves of Louisiana.
Thank you.
Just days away from the 2016 March for Life, forecasts for a big winter storm hitting D.C. are causing concern. National Weather Service meteorologist Chris Strong updates the storm's timing.
Well, middle afternoon, I think we'll see it move in. I think it's going to move in pretty quickly, so the snowfall will start to accumulate almost immediately, I think. Then really the worst of it is going to be Friday night and pretty much through the day on Saturday, with the winds kicking up, heavy snow at times, near whiteout conditions. There's a blizzard watch up for the Washington metro area, which is not something we throw around very often in these parts, so a pretty substantial storm.
All right, so a blizzard is worse than a storm, blowing snow. What kind of accumulation are you expecting out of this?
I think widespread we'll see double-digit, more than a foot accumulations across the area. I think there's even the potential to see around 2 feet in some areas. We'll have to refine exactly where that is and will be over the next couple of days, but certainly a lot of potential for some very heavy snow.
Some groups have already canceled their trips, but March for Life organizers say the march will go on. You can watch live coverage throughout the day right here on EWTN. And pro-lifers on the West Coast are also gearing up for major pro-life events this weekend. The second annual One Life L.A. is set for this Saturday. It's good to have Kathleen Domingo, Associate Director of the Office of Life, Justice, and Peace for the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, joining us by Skype. One Life L.A. is more than a march. Tell us about all the different activities that you have to promote respect for life at all stages.
Absolutely. So One Life L.A. was conceived as a way to unite the community around service. We will have a march through the city streets of Los Angeles, and it ends in a family-friendly celebration in our big park, Grand Park in downtown LA, where people will have an opportunity to visit our community partners, which are service organizations here in Los Angeles. They can see all of the different hands-on, life-affirming service opportunities that they can get involved in. We want them to leave knowing exactly what they'll do next to build a culture of life right here in LA.
And how does this tie in with the Jubilee Year of Mercy?
Well, Pope Francis is challenging all of us this year not only to take advantage of opportunities to receive mercy, but to be agents of mercy in our community, starting in our own families. And we've taken that to heart as we've planned this year's One Life LA. We've thought it through. How are people to get involved in hands-on service? So it's one thing to write a check. It's another thing to vote pro-life. All of those things are great, of course. But I think the Holy Father is really challenging us. Get involved with people. Look them in the eye, visit them where they are, be in solidarity with them, do hands-on service. And that's what we hope comes out of One Life LA this year.
This is a very new event, yet you've been very successful drawing large crowds. How many do you expect? And in addition to Archbishop Gomez, who are your speakers?
Well, it's definitely hard to say how many we'll expect. Last year, our inaugural year, we were blown away by 15,000 people. So this year, we've planned an event that we hope will attract so many more. We are so pleased to have Nick Vujicic as our keynote speaker. Nick heads up Life Without Limbs ministry, and he is an internationally known motivational speaker and advocate for all people and the dignity of everyone. We have a special announcement just today breaking that Alexander Acha will be joining us as our musical guest, and we are so thrilled to have him as well.
Well, Kathleen, Domingo, thank you for the preview. Of course, there will be many watching on EWTN. One Life LA. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you so much.
Coverage of One Life LA starts at 5 p.m. Eastern after the Walk for Life West Coast in San Francisco. That coverage begins here on EWTN 2:30 Eastern, Saturday afternoon. Up next, seeking alternatives to the Affordable Care Act, how some people are putting their faith first, and growing the ranks of priests. We'll learn about the increase in ordinations. Thanks for joining us this Wednesday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. A Supreme Court decision on the president's executive action on immigration is expected by late June. We have Carrie Severino, Chief Counsel at the Judicial Crisis Network, providing perspective on this issue. So, what is the issue, and why would you expect a ruling perhaps against the administration here?
Well, this has to do with the challenge to the president's most recent executive action, giving effectively legal status, at least temporarily, to a large swath of immigrants. And it was challenged, and the Fifth Circuit said they can't go forward with implementing it because it simply violates the Constitution. I think that's actually the reason that the Supreme Court will probably rule against them. This court has not been shy in the past to stand up when the president was pushing the bounds of his executive authority, and this is a case in which the president really has taken it beyond what the president has the authority to do. Congress is the one that has to change the immigration laws. The president can't do it single-handedly.
The president has had 7 years, though, to deal with this. Why is he not working with Congress to pass meaningful immigration reform?
Well, after the president gave the DACA regulation, which also has been controversial, he asked Congress to basically go the next step, and they didn't choose to do so. So whether that's because the unions were opposed and even the Democrats weren't with him on this, the bottom line is this is Congress's job to do. And when Congress has said, no, we don't want to make this law, the president can't say, fine, I'm going to do it myself.
What's the significance of the court adding a question about the take care clause, and what is that?
Yeah, that's the clause that says the executive has to take care that the laws be faithfully executed. And there's a real question here. The president's saying we actually don't want to implement the immigration laws. They're saying that instead of having people that are illegally here be deported or be found to be illegally present, he's going to say no, they're going to be called lawfully present. That means the president's actually not taking care to enforce the laws. The court added that question in and of itself. This isn't something that was asked, the court was asked to look at. So I think that really suggests they are very skeptical about the president's action here. They think it's novel and probably a stretch of his power.
When do you think we'll have a ruling from the High Court on this?
This is probably going to come at the end of June, along with all these other really important cases. The Little Sisters of the Poor case is a big abortion case out of Texas as well. So it's going to be an exciting term.
Well, thank you for the clarification, and thanks for joining us, and we'll follow up with you, Carrie Severino.
Great.
Well, conservative health care experts say more people are signing up for insurance alternatives. They say that's because Obamacare does not respect Christian values. Catherine Szeltner tells us more about this trend.
Brian, policy analysts say there's a rapid rise in healthcare sharing ministries. These ministries are not insurance exchanges, they are nonprofits where community members share costs. One expert claims registration has tripled in the U.S. in 10 years. At a D.C. panel today, speakers said Obamacare's abortion and contraception mandates violate conscience rights. Sharing ministries claim to protect Christian rights because they're exempt from controversial regulations. The executive director of one ministry says American Catholics are attracted to these healthcare alternatives.
Really a desire, A, to protect religious freedom, B, to make sure that I can live as a Catholic, I can live as a Christian, my faith and my healthcare decisions. But C, we've also seen people really say, I want community.
Dee Dee Kism directs a Catholic women's medical center called Bella. She says demand for their services are booming now.
When we opened our practice, we were actually afraid that we wouldn't even be reimbursed because we're a non-contracepting, non-sterilizing, non-abortive practice. We've registered 1,200 patients in 13 months.
The health sharing ministries say they're part of the new evangelization because they meet the needs of people today. Another difference between these ministries and insurance, health ministries do not assume any risk or guarantee coverage. Brian?
Thank you, Catherine. And we have a better picture tonight of the newest class of men ordained to the priesthood. A survey was recently conducted by Georgetown University. Dr. Ann Hendershott, sociology professor at Franciscan University of Steubenville, Skyping with us from Connecticut. You recently wrote an article looking at statistics in this survey. Can you give us an idea of some of them?
I did. They're very positive statistics. There's a 25% increase in ordinations in the class of 2015 from the previous year, and that's certainly good news. Our church should be celebrating this news. And unfortunately, nobody much knows about it. This news came out last spring, and hardly anyone writes about it. Even the data gatherers, those from the Carrie Institute at Georgetown who collected the data for this survey, they haven't been bragging about it. Nobody does. I don't know why we don't want to give good news.
Well, certainly certain dioceses are doing better than others. What can you tell us about those dioceses?
Well, that's true. And I think maybe the reason we don't want to brag about some dioceses is we don't want to make the others feel bad or something. But Bishop Morlino's diocese in Madison is just amazing. He had 33 seminarians there, and that's up from 6 in 2005. So it's real positive news. He was running a campaign to help fundraise to help ordain those young priests, and his goal was $30 million, and he met that goal, more than met. People really want priests, and we want to pray for our priests, and we want to do all we can to bring more men into the priesthood. We know there's a lot of vocations, which we want more ordinations.
We heard so much about the priest shortage. Are we turning the corner? Is this a trend toward a much more positive outlook?
Yeah, it's a great trend. Even though we don't brag about it enough, certainly we only have about a third of the priests we need and about a third of what we had in 1965. But the trajectory is good. The trend is very positive. And I've been following this for more than a decade. In fact, I was on your show a couple of years ago talking about my book, Renewal, and the data weren't even as good as they are today. So this is good news, very good news.
We appreciate the good news. Dr. Ann Hendershott, professor of sociology at Franciscan University in Steubenville, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Brian.
And before we leave, we just want to remind you that EWTN is planning complete coverage of the March for Life and all of the events surrounding it, beginning with the Mass, the Vigil Mass for Life at the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception on Thursday evening. So be sure to stay with EWTN. In spite of the storm, we do have coverage. Until tomorrow, for the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Tonight, we leave you with a celebration of a saint. In San Sebastian, to the north of Spain, they're celebrating their patron's feast day. Saint Sebastian, a 3rd century martyr in modern-day France. This year, 135 drumming groups all dressed up join the festival.